Hi there, Sarah Lucille here, founder of Energy of Your Message, and you're listening to the Energy of Your Message podcast. Thank you so much for being here. This is a space for who I call the taboo teachers and messengers. That is what my program, Energy of Your Message, is built entirely around. Folks who are here with an important message to share, and it cannot be confined into tiny marketing boxes. You're someone who wants to teach. You almost have to teach. You feel the calling to do so or work with people one-on-one. You are someone with something to say, ways that you help people that feel very unique and unusual. And maybe it's not always easy to describe it because it's probably very multifaceted. That's extremely common. And yet, you feel fulfilled when you embrace it. When you get that moment of teaching a workshop, that is exactly what you feel like you should be doing, or working with someone one-on-one and they say to you exactly the impact they felt, but while being in your energy and you feel, damn, yes, this is what I feel called to do. But then when it comes to marketing that, getting clients, doing so consistently, that's where a lot of the frustration comes in for the taboo teachers and messengers. And that's where I've come in over the years, where I have helped people find their words, which is more than just let's get into copywriting and marketing, because the marketing is a means to communicate and reach people. But what taboo teachers are not interested in is selling out. They're not interested in selling for the sake of selling. You could do so many things. You are multi-talented, multi-passionate. You've likely held many roles. You might hold many roles right now. You could feel like you need to write a book. You want to have a podcast. You want to work with people one-on-one. You want to teach retreats. You want to do all kinds of things. Maybe you've had a lot of different gigs and jobs and held a lot of different titles and degrees and certifications and licenses and all of those things. So essentially, the real desire and challenge there is what would it look like to authentically express what it is that you do, how it is that you help people, and what it is that you want people to realize that comes through you. And when you say it, it makes sense. It lands. And it's exciting when that happens. So that's what we're doing in my 12-week intensive Energy of Your Message. This is for the folks who have rarely found it easy to try and follow the conventional path. Therefore, a lot of conventional approaches to marketing just don't make sense. So even when you try, settling just doesn't do it for you. Squeezing your message into a one-liner where you are supposed to only focus on one outcome just doesn't do it. And you're not going to go all in if you're feeling like you have to settle to do so. So Energy of Your Message, the 12-week intensive, is something that I run a couple times a year. I'm about to wrap up the current cohort. So if you're interested in applying for the next cohort, go to sarahlucille.com/mentorship. Also, if you want to receive the weekly newsletters, the stories of becoming, and get access to my free journal and start there, that's totally fine too. You can go to sarahlucille.com/newsletter. All right. Thank you for being here with today's episode. We're going to be talking about identity. This is something that has been coming up a lot lately, but honestly, it is something that has come up throughout my career. And you're going to be getting this podcast very Marco Polo style, meaning I send daily Marco Polos to my best friend. She gets the side of me that just talks about whatever's coming through and the way that it's coming through. And every time I do that, I'm like, dang, that's what I need to go talk about. That's what I need to go write about. And then if I try to get too formal with it, it's like it poof goes away. So it's kind of funny because that's like how we approach messaging and Energy of Your Message as well, where it's like, what is your most natural voice? What would it sound like if you didn't feel like it had to be filtered, had to make sense, had to sound polished the first time? And so today, everyone listening is my best friend. We're on Marco Polo. We're going to pretend, and I'm just going to tell you what's been coming up. And the topic of identity is one thing. So my entire, I'd say, like interest in having a career keeps coming back to identity. Whether I was a teacher, whether I was a copywriter, communications director, whatever I was doing, I couldn't put it down. So when I talk about, having a message, doing something in the world that you feel called to do, that's often the experience where you feel interested in something over and over and over and over, no matter what you do, even if it doesn't seem practical. And when I did my undergrad, my BA, my bachelor's is in history. I focused on ancient European history with an even more specific focus on mythology. So we had to do a thesis in our undergrad program. I know not every undergrad program does that, but for the history department, we did have to. We even had to present it to the entire faculty and to our peers and get their feedback and have multiple advisors and things like that. It was extremely challenging, and I'm very, very grateful for the experience because it really helped me really think about how I can use communication and language to bring together all of these patterns that I'm recognizing when I study history and mythology. So my thesis was on the Athena Parthenos, which is a statue, as a symbol of the Athenian identity and Athenian imperialism. My 10-year-old self could never have told you I would be writing about that and that I would even know what the Athena Parthenos was. What's interesting though is even when I was a kid, I was so interested in mythology, and my kids are too. So I think that's really fun because that means we get to talk about it a lot. The Athena Parthenos is something that I think for me at the time was also just really bringing up our own country. I live in the US, our country's relationship to symbols as well. How important the flag is to many people, certain statues, debate around whether certain statues should and shouldn't exist, what pieces of history get held in these monuments, and what parts of history get erased and denied. And so the Athena Parthenos was very interesting to me because it was really exorbitant. It was really fancy, very over the top expensive, kind of like a ballroom. And it was sculpted to be so, right? It was a celebration of the victory over the Persians, but it was a symbol of Athenians' concept of superiority, feeling like the superior group over the Delian League, allies, and essentially every piece of the statue I explored in that thesis to talk about that the statue's made of gold and ivory, each piece of that statue holding a significant meaning in mythology. And it supports Athenian actions of going to war, for example, and still feeling like the superior group, superior society. And also the Athenian belief around being the wisest, the most forward thinking, the most culturally developed. So the statue held a lot of this meaning. And to see it, this colossal image, which was so visible, was significant. That's important. And the funding that went into it, that's significant. That's important. That was a decision. It has a statement of power to it. It's built with the money of allies, right? Other people's money were used to build this statue. And the goddess Athena herself was linked to things like warfare, but strategic warfare, not chaotic, because that adds to that Athenian superiority. And so in thinking of that, I think that brings up the ways in which all of this isn't just one thing. A statue in and of itself is a statue, but where the statue came from, when the statue was put up, why it was put up, where it was put up, how it was funded, like why it's significant how it was funded, the materials that were used, and the symbols on the statue itself, and the mythology behind those symbols. And mythology is interesting to me because I think it's talked about in a way as though it's not something we currently participate in. Like we talk about ancient mythology a lot, or we're referring to other cultures that we're taught to feel are very distant from us. We participate in mythology to this day. And knowing that it plays a large role in how we identify or how identities are projected onto us, and where, as a taboo teacher, you may have felt wrong for not fitting into the mythology, fitting into various archetypes, not following the path that is lauded as the right path to follow. Examples. So I grew up in the US, so I'm going to refer to the US, but this does not have to be exclusive to the US. We have, when we go to school here, schooling is its own experience, right? Schooling also has this tremendous impact on identity and how we feel about ourselves and what we learn and don't learn and things like that. This topic could go on and on and on. What we do learn about as well is in US history, we're taught history often as though it's a series of events that have a clear storyline and it's undeniable. And these are the things that happened and these are the people that were part of it. And that's it, right? And now you need to answer a multiple choice exam on these things. And so when I went to get my bachelor's degree in history, it was a lot of deconstructing that, of really actually exploring how much we don't know and how important it is to say so. Because in the recording of history, we're still getting story. And it's important to examine that because that story influences our identity. And that could be how we think about our own history, our own personal history, our own personal experiences with people in environments where we grew up, how we feel about our career track, the story of our family, the story of our friend group, right? The story of who we are and how that's like fed into like, I'm just this kind of person. And on a larger scale, the stories that we are taught are part of our lineage, that are part of our history. So the American myths, one example would be manifest destiny. This is the idea of going into the wilderness as though there weren't already people there and bringing order and civilization to justify the actual genocidal behaviors that occurred, the actual atrocious behaviors that occurred, the wiping out of indigenous communities, and calling that imposing order and civilization, seeing it as the spreading of a civilized group with very uncivilized behavior. So that's one of the powers of mythology is you get these hero stories and this, concept of the hero. But if you were to objectively look at the behaviors of a hero in many stories and the behaviors of a villain, you're gonna be like, hey, they're both kind of doing some messed up things. Or sometimes you find, I'm not even sure what the villain did to become a villain, right? That's important. One of the shows that I think did an okay job with this, it's just such an unpleasant show for a lot of folks, but The Walking Dead, I remember watching it and there's the dilemma of, the group that we're watching is Rick's group, right? Like we're supposed to be on their side. We know these characters. We're relating to them. We know what they've been through. We've seen Rick's journey to becoming, the person who woke up disoriented in the hospital room and not knowing what is going on, to going on the journey to finding his wife and his kid, and then finding out his wife is with his best friend. And then Rick eventually becoming the leader. Sorry if that spoiled anything, but that is very early season stuff. But you get the journey, so you're kind of invested in it, right? And so you want to be invested in his success and the peace that you want them to have. Like, oh, you just want them to be okay. You feel like, okay, they're living in this prison together. It's not, the prison doesn't exist as a prison system because everything's fallen apart with what happened with the walkers, but you're hoping like for them to be okay. And so we're more invested in this person who is kind of the hero archetype, yet he and his folks do some pretty atrocious things. Murdering people in their sleep is an example, without actually knowing that much about those people. They just know that they're told that these people are causing distress to these other people that they want to collaborate with. And so they take action on it to put it down. And we're supposed to now see the people that were murdered in their sleep as the enemy to justify the action. But the action isn't very heroic, right? It's quite atrocious. And then if you get the point of view of the people who were on the side of those who were murdered in their sleep, you start to get kind of like uncomfortable. You're like, oh my gosh, is Rick a villain? He might actually have also been a pretty terrible person. So then we get into identity, right? Because we really are wanting to decide who we are and who other people are. And it's uncomfortable when there isn't a clear answer to that. And that plays a pretty significant role in how we are able to make decisions and see ourselves and speak on things and teach on them and think we, believe in our possibility around it. So America has a lot of mythologies that have led to the American identity. The self-made man is another example. That's supposed to be the belief that anyone, regardless of their background, can have success, that you can have the house and the white picket fence and all of that. And now, this is 2026, people are experiencing that identity feeling very challenged. People who did follow what felt like the right path, the conventional path, to wake up to emails that their job has been eliminated, to wake up to find out the company they work for no longer exists, that then in the job market, the options are very limited and the options that exist are nowhere near the pay that they used to be at or the pay that would make sense for the cost of living. And people used to rely so heavily on like, well, if you want to have more money, you need to work the kind of jobs that pay you more money. Get a better job. That's what a lot of people say. Go get a better job. You're taught to believe it is somehow your fault. That's the important part of the self-made man myth. When I remember when it was it Kylie Jenner, we were told was like the first self-made billionaire. I don't know if I'm getting that right. I don't really want to look into it right now, but the idea of that even being possible, that like what do we mean self-made? What are we talking about when we say that? But it's an important myth to hold up the belief that if something goes wrong for you, it's your fault and you're the person who has to fix it. And therefore, you're ungrateful if you start to notice the systemic reasons in place for why your situation is now more difficult than it used to be, say, 10 years ago. When you recognize, like, hey, this might be bigger than me. This might be bigger than just go get another job. Because then, the people who did do the degree that they were supposed to do, they did the job that they were going to do that was going to pay the certain amount, are finding like, dang, that wage doesn't even work anymore. That was supposed to be the high paying position, and it doesn't work like it used to as far as the cost of living of everything else in a country that doesn't cover your health care. Even when your health care is covered by your job, you are paying into it in most cases, in a place where a medical bill could wreck a lot of people. But holding up the construct of like the belief that we are self-made means rejecting complaining about it and instead of also seeing, it as a complaint rather than as an observation and an invitation to have a conversation about what else is possible. Because what else is possible requires a lot of collective action, requires doing things differently, and in so not enabling the powers that benefit from us having the belief in the myth of being self-made. Because then also we have to believe some of those powers and where they are and the position that they hold over people because they earned it, because they deserve to be there, right? So these myths do play a significant role. Yes, self-made, I think, is a feel-good identity for some people, but there's also, where people will say things like, America's a melting pot. America is the nation of immigrants. And, they'll tell the story of Ellis Island and talk, you look at where your ancestors are from. I remember making our family tree in school, and we're looking at like most of my ancestors came from Ireland and what that means. Like, and they came here for a better life. And we're supposed to feel good about that. We're supposed to feel good, but not carry that over to people now, especially when we're talking about immigrants of color. When we are exploring the melting pot conversation, they're usually talking about white folks. if we're going to be truly honest. But you're not supposed to say that. And in fact, it's supposed to be offensive to say so. It's supposed to be offensive to name you're white as far as identity goes, as far as identifying a person. Why? What, like making something offensive to recognize and to name what it means, especially when it comes to talking about us collectively and culturally and how that influences things like policy and how people are treated and what that treatment means as far as opportunity and things like that, but also feeds into different identities that get internalized and what that can cause as far as stress, trauma, all of the above. We embrace everybody as long as you earn it, right? Claim to have that like self-made thing, but then you'll hear the story of someone who was getting their family, their children out of a terrible situation, and that included moving to the US. That included crossing the border to leave a situation to protect their family, sending money to their family, and change the characters in that story. And that would become a mythology where that's a hero. But if they're not the right characters, if they are the characters who have been villainized, then that story is not as embraced. So that's how significant too the identity role is played. And again, mythology and identity going hand in hand. Why am I talking about this? Because we, as taboo teachers, as messengers, as folks who help others in healing ways, helping people tap into who they are, finding their voice again, moving their bodies, expressing themselves, realizing different ways to nourish their body. I've worked with a lot of health coaches. I've worked with physical therapists. I've worked with physicians who are offering online programs and products. I've worked with a lot of artists who are creating courses and programs as well and retreats. I've worked with movement therapists, lots of folks, energy workers, people who offer really unique ways through the way that they teach for people to tap into their own personal power. And that's the point, right? When we are saying we help people heal, it's not claiming authority over their healing. That's pretty significant. Like if, you're going to therapy and you're working with your therapist, the therapist isn't claiming I healed you. The therapist is asking the kinds of questions that help you realize that you have the tools, that you have it in you to address what you need to address when it comes to facing certain things that want to be faced. And so that can happen in so many different ways. I feel like there is a collaboration that happens when the folks who are the messengers and the taboo teachers do what they're meant to do in the world, create their art, create their programs. When people are interacting with your message, it offers them something new. A new seed gets planted. And that's a beautiful thing, right? So here's the thing, back on the identity stuff. When I looked at like identity through mythology on a bigger scale. But what myths have we over-identified with? What stories have played a significant role in the limits of our own identity, especially as folks with a message? So in Energy of Your Message, I get so much into who you are as the messenger because this is a pretty significant part of it. What you go through is likely going to be something that you recognize in someone else who needs your wisdom at that time. I used to have some bitterness when I was told, you have the wounded healer archetype in your chart, for example. You have a journey of, you go through things that you're likely to teach on. And I wanted to say, I don't want to have to be in pain to learn what I need to learn. I don't want to have to transform through suffering. And I don't think it was that simple. It wasn't that binary, but it's kind of like the tower reversed in tarot. When there's a resistance to change, because I do think, one, the identity is feeling ruffled. The self is feeling afraid of constructs that need to be deconstructed, of ways of thinking of yourself, of ways of thinking about what you can and can't have, your possibility are being challenged. The ways in which we do or do not embrace the change that is wanting to happen amplifies how much it hurts. I don't know how else to say that. amplifies how much it hurts in that I know things that I would keep putting off, whether that was a relationship I knew needed to be over, that was a work environment I knew I needed to leave, but I was tied up in things around scarcity and obligation and thinking, this is as good as it gets, or I need to hold on to this, or like I need to be loyal. My concepts around loyalty, which were demanding self abandonment. The longer I put it off, the harsher that tower moment was. And so I remember seeing a reader. She was talking about how much she loves the tower reversed card because for her, when she reads the tower reversed, it's really about, a significant change that doesn't necessarily require or mean that like a big crumbling is happening and like is inevitable in a way if you keep saying I want this, I want to be on this path, I want to do these things. As someone with a big message to share, you will be challenged to express yourself more, be yourself more, be more honest, be real, be you in all the ways that you are you. And what does that mean? So, yes, that is something that we dive into pretty deeply in Energy of Your Message. Also, if you want to start with a reading, I do path and purpose readings. It isn't to tell you this is your purpose in life. It is realizing what is the path that you're on? What is the path and the meaning of this path that you're feeling you know is there, but you're looking for the words for it, on where you're aligning in life, why you're aligning with that, what patterns you're breaking. If you want to start there, I do have a reading. I'll put the link in the show notes. I'll also send it out to those of you on the email list where you can book a quick reading to get into it of like what is going on for you right now, what would make sense for you to explore that could really help you to start expressing yourself, to really leaning into maybe where you're going with your business, your career, your offers, what you're creating, maybe who you're collaborating with, things like that. We can get into that. But on that, what I have found in myself and all of the messengers I've worked with, meaning all of the folks I've worked with over the years, one-on-one or in group, is this really strong desire to have answers for who are you? And that is where it feels so good to find each other, because through each other, a lot of the times, what we are able to do is to help each other feel seen in ways that maybe you don't in other spaces and places. It is very common for the messenger, the taboo teacher, to spend a lot of years not feeling recognized for you and the complexities of you. And so then feeling very drawn to things like astrology, human design, archetypes, personality tests. And I do all of those things. And I do love them as systems for understanding, you know, possibility, ways to express yourself, energies to play with. Human design, for example, is a great way to kind of understand your own unique energy. I mentioned being a projector in human design. You could be a manifester, manifesting generator, generator. What does that mean? If you already know, you know. But that is a way, to kind of understand a system for your strategy in life that might help you feel less stress, less resistance, less tension. Astrology, long history there. I don't think I could sum it up in one statement. Some people approach astrology as like a personality thing. Some people take a great issue with that it's very simplified, that pop astrology has simplified it. I think, it's pretty great for people to have a gateway into exploring astrology. And if some people never get past their sun sign, whatever. That doesn't really harm me. If they want to stay exploring their big six, awesome. But it is a very cool, intricate, very ancient system for understanding themes, patterns. Yes, how that might manifest in your personality and your self-expression and how you feel things. Energies that you have access to tap into more so than others. For example, like if you have a lot of mutable energy, if you have a lot of fixed energy, what could that mean? So all of this can be really wonderful. And when people do it, it's so cool because they'll be like, dang, like that makes so much sense for me, or I feel really seen. I'm a huge fan of archetypes. I always have been, especially in writing, where I think it's really fun to explore expressing your voice through an archetype. Like if I were the hero, how would I talk about this? If I were the nurturer, how would I talk about this? And then, people get into like Myers-Briggs, the psychological tool based on all of that. And there's different debate on the accuracy there, depending who you're talking to. But again, people still find certain words and phrases that have that aha moment because there's a craving to understand, who the heck am I? And what would make my life easier? What can I do to feel like my best self, to feel fulfillment, to feel like things could go a lot easier for me, to find my people, to know what's compatible with me and what's not. Still, all of these things are at risk of feeding into or becoming story if it's staying in this like intellectual exercise, if it's staying kind of in the realm of looking for answers rather than realizing them. And so, what I know through what I would say would not be the easiest experiences is you really can't skip the journey to self. That, like, the actual becoming part, becoming the messenger, becoming the taboo teacher, becoming the wise being that you were always meant to be, is the journey. Is like the journey is the freaking point. And this is probably where I do take issue and have, if you know me, I've taken issue with where this conversation about things like AI, LLMs has gone, because it has turned into skipping the journey in a lot of ways, where it was like, this thing wrote my email sequence in 10 minutes for me, but the email sequence writing experience too, emails, I don't know why I spoke on email sequence, but for example, you are going to be building an email list to get your message out there and to reach potential clients, right? So you send them a series of emails, or you have a series of emails ready to go when they opt in that offer the story of your message, who you are, ways to reach out to you, programs that you offer, things like that. So people have email sequences to be part of their launches. They have email sequences to be part of nurturing a relationship with a new person on their email list. I think they're wonderful. I've helped people write many, many, many of them. And I will say that it takes like 2 to 3 iterations of them to like really get to what you're trying to get to. They're a pretty big project to take on, but like, I think delegating them, great. But doing so without any participation in the message, I have experienced as like when I've done copywriting projects, when the client and I had kind of a like, I'm ordering an email sequence, can you do this? And we really didn't have a like ongoing conversation or back and forth. It was more difficult to get to the real message, to get to the real voice of it, to get to the real expression of it. So it's like in working on it with people who we're in conversation, we've done sessions together, we are, up for the multiple iterations of it, is where we get into, what am I really expressing? What am I here to say? Am I saying, am I being bold? Is this my voice? What would it mean to like be more in my voice? How do I know? And the whole point of what I'm saying here is that's an example of being part of the journey. So if we're just plugging prompts into AI or an LLM, for example, and we're saying, generate it for me, because I'm like, people are saying it's AI written. AI isn't writing anything. So AI is generating words together based on patterns, based on probability, based on trying to get the best possible answer to the prompt that you gave, based on trying to please you. AI cannot be you. It cannot be in relationship with your message the way that you are. Yeah, you could get it reflected back to you in different ways, and that could be cool. You could get different words and phrases to use that you didn't think of using before. You're going to have to prompt a lot. That's what's funny about it, is the effort that goes into the prompting. Another thing too is the relationship you're having with the expression of the message itself. The journey is part of the point. And back to like who am I? What is my voice? What am I here to say? How am I here to say it? What does it mean to be authentic? What does it mean to be me? What does it mean to put it out there and be bold about it and let go of the things that I'm afraid of, where I'm holding back? That's when I start working with folks, right? Like when they're really ready to express themselves. And it comes with a little bit of deconstructing the self, letting certain things fall away, being really clear with yourself, having a consistent practice of self-awareness. We do a consistent, energetic daily writing practice and energy of your message for a reason. I do my own practice every day for that reason, because the journey and then the relationship, the active relationship to the journey is where the message comes alive. So you go through different experiences. You have conflict, tension, joy, celebration, love, breakups. You have wins, you have losses. You try something and fail. You try something and succeed. You have a relationship that starts to change and you don't know why it's changing. You are changing yourself and you don't know what's going on. Why am I feeling this way? You learn more about yourself as far as your cycle, how you feel at different times of the year, what it, would mean to live by a body of water, for example. Like life is this adventure in a lot of ways of becoming. But are we in passive relationship to the becoming and the identities that are getting glommed onto us along the way because of how we were raised? Coming from someone, I was raised going to a Baptist church, for example, that had a very specific message around morality and who's a good person and who's not, and who's a real Christian and who's not a real Christian. And then I had my grandma, who was a Methodist preacher, who defied a lot of people's opinions about a woman and what a woman should and shouldn't be doing in the church as a leader. And she was a traveling preacher, and I got to travel with her and see a different point of view on a religion that wasn't as dogmatic and had a lot more open-mindedness to it, for example. So the experiences I had could have landed an identity that I settled on and stayed passive in. This makes me good. This makes me bad. I'm going to do all the good things so that I go to the good place and be a good girl. Makes me want to throw up just saying that. And I didn't. So why didn't I, right? Why did you reject a lot of what was indoctrinated or attempted to be indoctrinated into you? Why did you reject these myths? Why did you reject certain identities? Why, actually interacting with the journey that you've been on is where the message starts to come alive. And you too, because also, even as unconventional as we get to be and want to be and are, you just being you is a wonderful gift to people because they see that it is possible to live life differently and to have joy and to have fulfillment. Because you see all these people who, claim to have all the answers of this is what people should be doing and this is right and this is wrong. And it's like, why are you so miserable? Why are you so worried about what other people are up to? Why do you care if that guy wears a dress? Why does it bother you that those two people love each other? What is bothering you that this person is fully herself in her artistry, expressing herself, thinking of artists like Megan Thee Stallion, for example. People get so bothered by a Black woman who is just in her authenticity and expressing herself unapologetically. And that's what gets her a lot of, love as well. People love her. People are inspired, but then there are people who are so bothered, They're so invested in seeing things not work for her. And why? Why is that? Why are these people somehow authorities, but they're so miserable, but that they don't know how to do anything that would match their own fulfillment? Why would we allow their critique to influence anything that we say and do or don't do? Why would I worry about someone who I would never trade places with? Right? And so part of the journey too is realizing we're still, even though we know this, stuff got in. Stuff got in. I had to have a very uncomfortable unraveling around my relationship to being someone who has her shit together, being someone who is, successful and, driven and smart and ambitious. And that's reflected in the things that I'm doing. But then, the things that I was having to do and the way I was having to do them was really life destructive to my own life force energy, meaning I was tired. I was burnt out. I was burning the candle at all ends and answering to people who could care less. Right? Waking up to text messages from a boss at the time that were throughout the entire night, emails from her throughout the entire night, demands, scrambling to please, scrambling to prove myself, scrambling to match something that would somehow mean I'm doing it. I'm doing well. Staying in relationships or staying in a specific relationship for far too long because of my relationship to, hearing things said about what it means about me that I am someone who will leave. And finally having to come around to that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. Where it was taught, it was ingrained in me how important it was to be loyal, how important it was to endure, the really pushing through. I have an email in my email sequence where I talk about the lineage of women in my family who are extremely hard workers, who really were very, very loyal women and very intelligent, very strong, but the hustle and the grind and the taking care of everybody else and the putting aside their own dreams and their own vision for their life in favor of what they were supposed to be doing or what served somebody else at the time because that's what made you a good person. That is a lot of the pattern breaking that had to be done. I did a whole email about it. If you sign up for the workshop, I'll also do a link to that. You will get that email. But this couldn't just be an intellectual exercise. So I actually want to read to you a card that I pulled from the Kim Kranz archetype book, The Wild Unknown Archetype deck. And the card is the Self card. And then I also pulled the Forest card. The two are relevant to what I'm talking about. The Self card says, this is Kim Kranz's words. The self is the prism that allows the spectrum of our personalities to radiate. It does not judge, prohibit, suppress, or oppress any of its parts, as it lovingly knows that all aspects have a time and a place and leads us to experience the full breadth of life's offerings. The self is the central abiding container, the awareness of the infinite universe of possibilities. When this card appears, it's a call to step back and to witness consciousness, to observe yourself navigating the world. Ask yourself, am I the stew or am I the chef? In most situations, our ego draws us into the cauldron where we swirl, spin, and smolder in chaos. Yet, the self is a graceful culinary dancer, watching, waiting, observing as the spectrum of ingredients become the flavor of our life. Look in the mirror for 30 seconds or more. Attempt to see the you behind the you. I loved that line of, am I the stew or am I the chef? Beautiful writing in this guidebook, by the way. Really wonderfully done. I love this deck. I'll link to it in the show notes as well. But am I the stew or am I the chef? Really, like in this journey is your active participation in the realization of the things that you are likely going to be speaking on. So when you're on that, like, what am I here to do? What am I here to talk about? How do I describe it? A lot of it is really coming back to you. Who are you? Are you expressing yourself? Are you being yourself? What does that mean? And where have you potentially still held back for various reasons? One could be professionalism, the belief, because maybe you do come from an industry that has a certain expectation around professionalism. Talking about my PT clients, for example, there may be this voice in the back of your head that are your peers, your teacher, the people that you've learned from on what you're supposed to talk about, how you're supposed to talk about, how you're supposed to conduct yourself, how you're supposed to dress, all of those different things. And is that true? Or are you supposed to ruffle some feathers around this? Are you meant to be the one who pushes people to think differently on this? Is part of healing the pain in the body being more authentically you? Because a lot of tension gets held in different places when we brace, when we hide, when we hold our voice back, when we grind our teeth so that we don't say the thing that we want to say, when we clench our jaw, when we breathe shallowly, like, all of these things that maybe potentially your message goes beyond the thing that you are told you're only supposed to speak on this thing and you're only supposed to speak on it this way. Yet that's not who you are. And you just, you're like, I'm here to challenge this. What does that mean? What is the self-observing you? Are you being the stew or are you being the chef? With that, I had the Forest card as well. So let me jump over there. The Forest card says, consider for a moment your earliest memory of the forest. It's likely it included all the mythic dynamics of this archetypal space. A little fear, a little enchantment, perhaps losing your way, perhaps discovering a secret mystical treasure. Such is the magic magic of the forest. It requires first that you enter it and then that you get lost within it. You may think that there is a path to lead you straight through, but soon enough you'll be on what is known as the pathless path. There are tricksters here, dense foliage, and entanglement, but equally present are the glimmers of fairy light and friends among the trees. You're on an adventure now, and there's no turning back, so embrace the dim light and the moving shadows, whether literal or imaginal. Brave the forest and get lost getting found. Love that line too. Get lost getting found. I like the combination of the self and then the journey into the forest, and thinking about mythology again and storytelling, how storytelling really does address the forest, the woods. We go into the woods. It's mysterious. It is scary. We may lose ourselves. We may get lost forever. We might be taken. We might not recover. But also in it, we learn new skills. We learn new survival skills. We realize our possibility. We realize what we're capable of. We challenge ourselves. Maybe you learn to climb a tree. You learn to build a shelter. You learn to make fire. You maybe connect with someone and learn to create an ally. You learn to communicate with animals. You learn to read the stars and the moon. And suddenly you're not who you thought you were at the other side of this forest, where you went in having a certain construct of yourself and came out realizing that that construct was so limited. And that's where your message may be challenging you too. So if you're feeling like, I don't know what to say, I don't know how to fully express this, I don't know how to go all in, it may be the need to go into the forest. There may still be patterns to recognize and to express and to realize aloud and to really embrace, damn, like I am this too. This is like, that's why I do talk about a lot in Energy of Your Message, remembering who you are, knowing who you are, and owning it. That's all I think I'm going to talk about today, because we're almost coming up on an hour. Thank you so much for being here with me. I will be probably talking about this in future episodes as well. If you have a question or a topic you want to submit, or you're interested in potentially coming on the podcast, please do reach out to me. The best way to do so is to get on the email list. And then when you receive emails from me, you can reply directly to them. So that is at sarahlucille.com/newsletter. Thank you so much for being here. Until next time.